It all started with one social media post, short, sharp, and unmistakably controversial. Susan Sarandon, a celebrated American actor and longtime activist, made her stance known in a video clip that quickly went viral. Looking directly into the camera, she proclaimed, "We must stop blindly supporting Israel's war machine." But it wasn't the criticism of Israel alone that sparked fury. It was what followed. She refused to condemn Hamas by name. When pressed in subsequent interviews, she pivoted, suggesting that labeling Hamas a terror group was a distraction from the larger picture. That soundbite hit every corner of the internet within minutes. Jonathan Roumie, an American actor known for his powerful roles, had been silent all morning. His team knew he was watching. As Susan Sarandon's remarks made headlines and began trending on X under hashtags like #Sarandon supports terror, Roumie's phone buzzed nonstop. Fans, veterans, Jewish families, even moderate voices in Hollywood. The fury crossed industry lines. But Roumie didn't just want to reply. He wanted to respond, and he wanted the world to hear it. Just after noon, he walked into the Fox studio in D.C., where he'd been scheduled for a segment discussing his latest project. Instead, he looked at the producer and said, "Scrap this segment, I have something else to say." 10 minutes later, the red light on the camera went live. Roumie sat forward, an American flag pin catching the studio lights, a small cross visible around his neck. He stared into the lens, eyes steady. His opening words would ignite a firestorm. "I want every American to hear me. Susan Sarandon just excused terror. She refused to call Hamas what it is, a radical Islamist death cult. And if you can't say that, you have no place lecturing the public on moral authority." The studio went still. Producers behind the glass exchanged glances. No teleprompter, no pre-written lines, just Roumie, raw, furious, and completely unfiltered. Online, the clip took off like a spark in dry grass. Millions watched, liked, reposted. Comment sections flooded with support, outrage, and everything in between. And Roumie wasn't done. He leaned in closer and said the line that would break the internet. "She sided with Hamas. I stand with America." The moment hit like a lightning bolt, and it was only the beginning. The tremor from Roumie's live statement didn't just rattle social media, it rocked Hollywood and the political discourse. Within hours, his name was trending alongside Susan Sarandon's in a digital firefight that lit up both conservative and liberal circles. The phrase, "She sided with Hamas, I stand with America," had already been clipped, captioned, and memified into 100 different formats: banners, profile headers, TikToks with war drums, and even projected on a building wall in Texas. Susan Sarandon's publicist, caught off guard by the blowback, issued a hasty press statement calling Roumie's remarks inflammatory, Islamophobic, and a dangerous misrepresentation of her views. But Roumie doubled down. He shared the full clip of Sarandon's comments and posted side-by-side screenshots. Sarandon refusing to condemn Hamas and, in contrast, grieving Americans holding up photos of Israeli children killed in the attacks. "This isn't about geopolitics, it's about terror," Roumie wrote. "And if Sarandon can't say Hamas is evil, then what exactly does she stand for?" That line cut deep, and the backlash only intensified. Meanwhile, at a major public event, cameras turned as Roumie walked with purpose. Some onlookers hissed under their breath as he passed. Others stood silently. A few prominent voices whispered, "Thank you for saying what we couldn't." But Roumie didn't stop for applause. He went straight to the microphone to deliver a new declaration, a formal demand for Susan Sarandon to condemn Hamas unequivocally. The room buzzed in disbelief. No one expected him to move this fast. "I'm not here to play Hollywood games," Roumie said, standing before a sea of stunned attendees and media. "I'm here to draw a line between truth and cowardice, between those who side with terror and those who still believe in the United States of America." Even some moderates blinked in silence. A few activists stood and left the gathering. Outside, a crowd was already forming. Veterans, pro-Israel activists, and ordinary Americans had gathered, holding flags and signs that read, "Silence equals complicity, and we stand with truth." Roumie took the steps outside the venue and raised his voice again. "If defending America makes me controversial, then I wear it like armor." A roar erupted from the crowd. Inside, Susan Sarandon's team scrambled because this time Roumie wasn't backing down. Roumie's powerful statement hit every major news desk just before noon. Bold, unapologetic, it named Susan Sarandon explicitly. It cited her refusal to condemn Hamas as a dangerous dereliction of moral responsibility and called for public figures to hold her accountable. No euphemisms, no political hedging, just the raw facts. C-SPAN cameras zoomed in on the headlines. Jonathan Roumie demands accountability from Susan Sarandon for Hamas stance. And there it was, the line no one else dared cross. The public square went still as Roumie rose to speak for a televised address. His red blazer caught the overhead lights, and the small cross around his neck shimmered for the briefest second. He carried a single piece of paper in his hand, a detailed account of his position. To the American people, he began, steady and strong, this is not a political stunt. This is not about party. This is about truth. And I will not let the silence of public figures speak louder than the screams of the victims. A ripple of murmurs flowed across the floor. Ms. Sarandon, Roumie said, turning his head directly toward the camera, addressing her. You were asked if Hamas was a terrorist organization. You deflected. You redirected. But you never condemned them. And when you remain silent in the face of evil, you make room for it to grow. Gasps. Sarandon didn't appear on screen, but her aides behind her looked visibly tense. One reached for a notepad, another whispered urgently into a phone. Roumie kept going. Let me be clear. Free speech is sacred, but our public platforms are sacred too. And we have a duty to the people who listen to us, to the flag above our heads, and to the values we claim to defend. If we cannot name terror when we see it, then we are no better than those who enable it. Applause erupted from some of the audience. Some sat frozen. A few even clapped, unsure if they meant to or not. On Twitter, the hashtag #CensureSarandon exploded. Cable news cut in live. MSNBC called it reckless. Fox called it brave. CNN didn't know what to call it, but they ran the headline anyway. Actor Jonathan Roumie sparks chaos with anti-Hamas demand. But to Roumie, it wasn't chaos, it was clarity. And for once, the silence in public discourse was finally breaking. The gallery above the public address venue filled within minutes. Gold Star families, veterans in dress blues, Israeli-American citizens holding miniature flags and cameras, lots of them. News crews lined the hallways, anchors scrambling to reframe what had become the biggest public debate of the year. The moderator's gavel struck once. Order, order. But nothing about what was coming next would be orderly. Roumie stood again. This time he wasn't holding just his notes. He held a photo, a blurred still from October 7th. It showed a young Israeli mother, bloodied, clutching her baby in a stairwell. The kind of image networks refused to show. The kind of image Roumie refused to let America forget. This child was crying when Hamas broke down their door, Roumie said, voice tight. And while they died, you were silent. Sarandon's team, watching remotely, scrambled for a response. Roumie cut through the impending PR battle. You don't get to call for unity when you can't even say the word terrorist. The room erupted. Some stood to cheer. Others shouted over each other, demanding order. Members of the press fumbled for their microphones. Staffers pulled out their phones, and the moderator looked like he'd aged 10 years in 10 seconds. Sarandon finally issued a statement. I will not be lectured by someone who has never faced displacement, never seen occupation, never lived as an actor navigating complex global issues in the public eye. Roumie didn't blink. I've never seen children raped by rockets either, but I still know it's evil. The oxygen in the chamber vanished. Fox News aired it live. So did Newsmax. But on TikTok, the clip was already viral. Roumie's voice, steady and brutal, played over footage of war-torn streets side by side with Sarandon's defensive statement. Comments poured in. He finally said what the whole country's been thinking. Jonathan Roumie just dragged Hollywood into the real world. About time someone took a stand. Outside the venue, a crowd had gathered, not protesting, but watching. Giant jumbotrons replayed Roumie's speech in real time. Veterans stood shoulder to shoulder with Gen Z influencers. There were no sides on the sidewalk, just people who had been waiting years to hear someone say the unspeakable out loud. Susan Sarandon released no immediate follow-up. Roumie looked back at the American flag and said into the mic without raising his voice, "You sided with them. I side with this." He tapped his chest where his small, shining cross rested and sat down. By the time Roumie stepped off the stage, the public sphere was buzzing like a kicked hornet's nest. Aides ran back and forth clutching damage control memos. Reporters yelled across marble hallways, and Susan Sarandon's press team was already in full containment mode. But Roumie, he walked straight through it all, calm, composed, resolute, like a warrior who just completed a mission, not an actor dodging blowback. Outside, the press descended. Jonathan, did you just accuse Ms. Sarandon of supporting terrorism? What did you mean by you sided with them? Do you stand by that? Are you calling for her to step away from her public platforms? Roumie stopped, turned, and faced the press line. I said what Americans say around their kitchen tables, but never here in the halls of public influence. Susan Sarandon refused to condemn Hamas. She refused to call them what they are, terrorists. That's not just silence, that's complicity. Gasps rippled. A CNN reporter's hand trembled as he scribbled the quote. Meanwhile, Susan Sarandon's camp tried desperately to reclaim the narrative. Her communications director pushed out a lukewarm statement about empathy for all affected civilians, sidestepping the actual names. Hamas, Israel, terror, like landmines. The progressive echo chamber amplified it, but it was too late. Roumie's footage had already hit 10 million views across platforms. Conservative pundits seized the moment. He said what Hollywood's been too scared to say. Jonathan Roumie just ended Sarandon's moral high ground. We just watched the future of independent voices, and it's fearless. Back inside, Hollywood power players scrambled. Agents were furious. A closed-door meeting was immediately scheduled. The activist community was in disarray. Half of them angry at Roumie, the other half furious at Sarandon for handing him the moral high ground. And the public, they were choosing sides fast. Parents were posting videos of their teenage daughters saying they wanted to be more like Roumie. Veterans recorded TikToks holding flags and saluting his courage. Middle America, suburban swing states, even moderate Democrats were chiming in. He's right. This isn't about politics. It's about decency. That night, Tucker Carlson ran the clip. So did Sean Hannity. But it wasn't just right-wing media anymore. Even CNN's Aaron Burnett opened with, "Actor Roumie's words lit up the nation today." Meanwhile, Roumie sat alone in his office, staring at his phone at a message from a Gold Star mother he'd never met. "My son died fighting terror. Thank you for not letting them forget who the enemy is." Roumie closed his eyes, breathed deep, and whispered, "This is only the beginning." Susan Sarandon wasn't used to losing the spotlight. For years, she had built her image as the loudest voice of the progressive left, defiant, globalist, unapologetic. But this time, her silence had betrayed her before she could draft the spin. Now under pressure from both the public and her own colleagues in the entertainment industry, she walked into a press conference, eyes cold, lips tight, statement in hand. "I will not dignify baseless accusations with a response," she said, her voice clipped. "What we saw yesterday was a dangerous stunt from a young actor who doesn't understand the complexities of global politics." She paused for applause, but none came. The room was frozen. Reporters glanced sideways. Cameras rolled. Everyone could feel it. Sarandon was bleeding credibility, and she knew it, but Roumie wasn't waiting around for Susan Sarandon's damage control. He had already booked an appearance on Hannity that night. When Sean asked him directly if he regretted confronting Sarandon publicly, he leaned in, fire in his voice. "Sean, when someone refuses to condemn terrorists who murder children and burn civilians alive, I don't care how many awards they've won, they deserve to be called out loudly, publicly, and without apology." The crowd in the studio erupted. Hannity couldn't even speak for a full 7 seconds. Roumie smiled, not smug but steeled, unafraid. Back on social media, the backlash against Susan Sarandon intensified. Hashtags like #StandWithRoumie and #SarandonResign were trending by midnight. Old videos resurfaced. Clips of Sarandon making controversial statements played next to footage of Roumie holding up the American flag. By morning, even liberal outlets had to acknowledge the optics. Sarandon looked evasive. Roumie looked decisive. Meanwhile, in Hollywood, internal polls showed a shocking trend, a double-digit drop in favorability for Sarandon among general audiences. Leaders in various advocacy groups issued cautious statements, urging her to clarify. Voters across the country were split, some furious with Roumie, others asking the hard question, why didn't Sarandon just say Hamas was wrong? At a charity gala, Roumie walked past Susan Sarandon without a word. Sarandon turned, eyes flashing. "You're reckless," she hissed under her breath. Roumie paused, then leaned in just enough to be heard. "No," he said, "I'm honest. That's what scares you." And with that, he walked away. The next morning, a sealed envelope landed in Jonathan Roumie's studio mail. No stamp, no official mark, just one word written in thick black ink, "Truth." He opened it cautiously. Inside was a single printed page. No signature, no header. But the content was explosive. It detailed a classified intelligence briefing from 2 months earlier. The document wasn't the original, but the wording was precise. It claimed that multiple public figures, including Susan Sarandon, had been briefed on Hamas activity on U.S. soil, sleeper cells, propaganda arms, fund transfers. The briefing had occurred before the October attacks, and yet not one of those figures had said a word publicly. Roumie's hands trembled, not from fear, but from the weight of confirmation. Someone in the intelligence community was fed up. They'd chosen him, the actor they once dismissed as too niche, to carry this fire forward. He didn't wait. Within an hour, he was on a national news broadcast and handed the document to the anchor. "If what this says is true," he said, "we have influential public figures who knew Hamas was preparing violence and said nothing." Whispers turned to shouting in the newsroom. Anchors leaned across the table. Phones buzzed. One staffer ran from the room to confirm. Susan Sarandon wasn't present, but her silence now screamed louder than any speech. That night, Roumie took it to Laura Ingraham. He didn't name names, not yet, but he read a line directly from the document. Certain public figures were briefed on external terrorist threats and failed to report to federal oversight committees. The moment the quote left his lips, the network froze the frame. Bold red font splashed across the bottom. Who knew? And why did they stay silent? The internet caught fire. Millions clipped the moment and reposted it with their own caption. Sarandon's silence isn't just cowardice, it's complicity. This isn't a debate anymore. This is national security. Susan Sarandon's office released a weak denial. "We cannot confirm the existence of such a briefing," but no one bought it. The document's language was too specific, too real. Calls flooded into news stations. Donors froze their support. Security was increased around Roumie's home. But he wasn't backing down. He tweeted 3 words that night. No hashtags, no image, just a promise, line by line. And everyone knew what came next. Roumie didn't sleep that night. The phrase line by line wasn't just a promise to the public. It was his war plan. By dawn, he had compiled a list of every public figure who'd attended the classified briefing cited in the anonymous document. 12 names, some known for their progressive activism, others for their media platforms. But only one name stood out in bold: Susan Sarandon, marked with a red underline, handwritten by the whistleblower. Roumie walked into a major press conference that morning not as an actor but as a storm. The halls were unusually quiet. Staffers looked away. Reporters whispered. His very presence now caused discomfort. He stopped in front of the press pool, held up a single sheet, the list, and said into every microphone, every lens, "I'm not accusing, I'm reading. You decide who's guilty." He didn't wait for questions. He walked away. Within hours, the story detonated. Conservative media ran wild. Liberal media scrambled. Every network, even the ones who despised him, had to cover it. Hashtag Who Knew rocketed to the top of social media. Susan Sarandon finally responded, this time in person, standing behind a podium, defiant. "This is political theater by a desperate extremist," she snapped. "There was no actionable intelligence. This is a smear campaign. Shame on him." Roumie responded with a smile and 6 words during a Fox News interview. "Why are you afraid of the list?" That quote alone generated 9 million views overnight. But what came next sealed the shift in momentum. At a town hall in Florida, a Gold Star father stood up. He held up a framed photo of his son, a Marine who had died in the October bombing linked to Hamas. He looked directly into the camera and said, "If my boy died and you knew it was coming, you don't deserve your platform." The audience was dead silent. Then someone clapped. Then everyone stood. Roumie was backstage watching. He wiped a tear, straightened his blazer, and walked back into the fire. He was no longer just a voice. He was now the nation's reckoning. The mainstream media had been silent, too silent. For weeks, they'd ignored Roumie's public inquiries. They hadn't demanded more information about the whistleblower. They hadn't even acknowledged the list he made public. But Roumie wasn't waiting anymore. On the morning of October 18th, he walked into a high-profile public forum, uninvited, flanked by Gold Star families and veterans who had lost loved ones in the Hamas attack. Cameras weren't allowed inside, but his voice, sharp, raw, unfiltered, would soon echo far beyond those marble walls. He laid 12 framed photographs on the table, one for each fallen soldier whose families now stood beside him. Then he spoke. "You let her sit here in silence while these families bury their sons. You think hiding behind procedure shields you? This isn't a debate. This is a cover-up." An aide tried to remove the photos. A veteran stopped him with a hand on the arm and a whisper, "Touch it and I'll speak." The room froze. Roumie turned to the forum's moderator. "You want to silence me? Try, but I dare every one of you to look these mothers in the eye and tell them why their sons mattered less than your network's power." No one spoke. That night, the clip leaked, not from a camera, but from a staffer who couldn't stay silent any longer. Within hours, no more silence trended globally. Veterans across the country posted videos holding up flags with one phrase: "We remember, you lied." Susan Sarandon posted again, this time with a calm, lawyer-written message. Misleading accusations fueled by grief and political ambition do not make them true. I will not dignify this with further response. But Roumie responded not with words, but with proof. He published the redacted portion of the internal DHS report. Line 17, Section C, multiple warnings flagged by domestic analysts indicating potential activity by non-state militant actors, including but not limited to Hamas-aligned groups, were deprioritized at request of two influential public figures. He circled the word deprioritized, and beneath it he wrote, "How many more, Sarandon?" That post alone shattered every record. Over 100 million views. The tide was no longer turning. It had become a flood. They tried to bury it, but Roumie made sure of all America remembered. On a brisk Sunday morning, he stood on the steps of the Capitol wrapped in an American flag. Thousands filled the plaza, veterans in uniform, mothers holding framed portraits, students who once watched him speak on their campuses. And at the front, Roumie holding the mic they tried to silence. He didn't open with a speech. He opened with names. One by one, he read them. The soldiers, the civilians, the voices silenced by terror and public neglect. With each name, the crowd echoed back, "We remember." Then came the final name, a brave truth-teller whose warnings had been dismissed. Roumie's voice cracked, but he didn't stop. He was mocked, attacked, deplatformed, but he never backed down. He warned us. He told us truth was under siege, and they laughed until it was too late. He raised his Bible high and the crowd followed. Thousands of Bibles, notebooks, and even phones raised like torches. Then he turned toward the dome behind him. His voice sharpened. Susan Sarandon chose silence. Public figures chose censorship. The media chose politics. But we choose truth. The crowd roared, but he wasn't done. He opened a small leather notebook, the Truth Teller's Journal. His last entry: "They may own the microphones, but we still own our voices. If I don't make it through tomorrow, tell them I fought with my whole soul." Roumie looked out at the crowd, tears barely held back. We told them, and now the whole world knows. His courage woke a nation. He placed the journal on the Capitol steps, laid the flag over it, and stepped back. Silence, then applause, then chants. We remember, we remember, we remember. Across America, networks scrambled to cut coverage, but it was too late. The live stream was everywhere. Mirrored, downloaded, re-uploaded. That night, Susan Sarandon's office issued a statement. Due to ongoing threats, Ms. Sarandon will be temporarily stepping away from public appearances. Roumie replied with one line: "The truth isn't a threat, it's a mirror." And with that, he walked off stage. No handlers, no teleprompters, just a nation finally listening. They mocked him, they silenced him, but the truth teller's voice didn't die. It multiplied. In every student who refuses to kneel, in every veteran who still believes in the flag, in every American who chooses country over cowardice. They thought his efforts would be the end, but it was the beginning of something louder, something they can't censor, cancel, or erase. This isn't about left or right, it's about truth, and we just put it on the record live. Their blood is on their hands, but his legacy is in ours. If you value this kind of unfiltered analysis and want to stay informed about the unfolding cultural war, please take a moment to subscribe to our channel and turn on notifications. Your support is what allows us to keep putting the truth on the record.